Okay, I'm gonna wait until it says 7:40 because that's what I wrote on the. Oh, we have 10 seconds. Here we go, and then we'll start. Okay, so let's get started. For those who are going to be watching on YouTube later, welcome back. We are on Simon. We are at Simon Rishon and Gimel. We had been thanks for everyone's patience and wishes of Mazel Tov. We're back. We had been discussing the topic of shehiyah, of food that is the preparation of food heading into Shabbos. So if there's food that's on the fire from before Shabbos into Shabbos, there were certain laws about where was that food in the cooking process. That was what we had dealt with. And so we saw how we had spent a lot of time on the first opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, which in short was that food had to be cooked. And sometimes even if it was cooked, it had to be mitztamek viralo in order for it to, which means that the continuation of the cooking was actually not necessarily good for it, and it would dry it out. Then it was okay if that food was on the into Shabbos. The one exception, which everybody agrees to, all opinions, is of course if there's raw meat as Shabbos enters in, then no problem. The case of the cholent, as that you turn right before Shabbos. Not a problem at all because that's far from your mind. We're not worried about the concern of raking the coals, of stoking the coals, because that cholent is not till tomorrow. So that was generally speaking the position of the Shulchan Aruch. We did see different iterations of this opinion depending on what kind of ancient oven was being used. There was a kofach. There was a tanur, which is our modern day word for oven, but the one that's the poskim assume is most similar to ours in terms of halacha is the kira. So we talked about the first opinion. The second opinion, we're going to review it quickly now because we had just I went back and looked at the last video. We had just finished all the way through the comments through Sifkat on Mem Dalet of the Mishnah Berurah, which takes us most of the way through the second opinion. But it would pretty much actually takes us all the way through the second opinion. But I just want to remind us, because this is the bottom line halacha for Ashkenazim, and I want to take a look at one interesting passage in the Be'er Halacha that speaks of the power of minhag. Okay, so we're in my edition on page 42, second line, where it says V'yesh Omrim, second opinion here that's being presented, again, out of Tosfos and of Rashi, the V'yesh Omrim. Okay. V'yesh Omrim, Shekol shenisbashel kamachal ben drusoi, that anything that is cooked to the point of machal ben drusoi, which is this point where even a robber bandit named Ben Drusai would eat his food minimally. Once he would just minimally cook it, and before that, they realized the wanted poster had a picture of him on then he'd be out of there. So Perashem Adam Hashaya Ochel Machalo Shalon is Bashal Kotzor, he would eat food that wasn't completely cooked. Ocean is Bashal Kotzorko, it's stomach v'yafalo, or it is fully cooked, but the continuation of it is actually like soup. The more you cook it, the more concentrated it gets, the more you can leave it on the kira, on top of the kira, or as we talked about, even in the kira, Erev Shabbos into Shabbos, not a problem at all according to this opinion. Or afilo al gabe tanur, or even on top of a tanur. And by the way, here again, the Mishnah Berurah is quick to point out, even in the tanur. And again, tanur was the oven in the ancient world, the way they envisioned it, a wider bottom, narrower top. My father was a chemist, Zechrono Livracha. He would always tell me heat rises. And so therefore, if you have a structure that forces the heat in one way, and you put a dish right on top of it in that one hole, the idea being that it will get as hot as possible in that one point because all the heat is rising. So even in that structure, the tanur, it's not a problem at all for us to put our food on top of that. Those of you just who joined, I see on Zoom, we are just reviewing the second opinion of the that is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. It's on page 42, which is probably 42 on your in your edition, and we are right after the comments of the Ramah and mine. It's at the beginning of line 5. I don't know where it is for you, but it's in your edition. This is afilu husak bekefes ve'etzim. So and afilu husak bekefes ve'etzim. Even if this fire that underneath the kira or the tanur is the fuel of the fire is wood, eitzim is wood, and gefes is the olive scraps that apparently again would burn and get very hot. And we had talked about that makes things complicated according to the first opinion. That's a fuel source where we're worried you're going to play with it, and unlike kash and gvava, which are completely consumed, unlike let's say coals don't get consumed, right? You can start playing with the coals. Straw, it's gone, right? You can't. Certain types of fuel will be gone, and so the fear of stoking the fuel is not there. But with gefes v'eitzim, we have that, but it doesn't matter according to the second opinion. We're all good. Afilu husak begefes v'eitzim, no problem. Afilu ena grufa ketuma, and even if you didn't rake the coals either to the side, as the Baal Amor would have it, which I think is the opinion that's going to make the most sense in the context of Chazara, or if you rake them out and you still have heat that is there, or ketuma means you covered the coals with ashes in order to almost really symbolically say that it's Shabbos and we're not going to play with the coals, not going to mess with the fire, fuel the fire. You don't need to talk in this world of the second opinion. You don't even start talking about grufa and ketuma and kash and gvava. Unless you're in a small window. The window is not raw, but not machal ben drusai, which again is the question: is it half cooked or a third cooked? That's the only window when this matters. And if you are in that window, if you do grufa and ketuma, modern day grufa and ketuma, most poskim hold is covering the knobs and dials that you could potentially be adjusting the temperature with. So then you're good to go no matter what the situation is. You really have nothing to worry about Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. We'll talk about different kind of issue. Ramaz is going to bring it up in just a moment. Okay. If you remove the pot from upon the fire, and then you want to return it to the fire on Shabbos, that's also where grufa and ketuma comes into play. As we'll talk about when we get to Sif Beis. We'll have a very lengthy discussion about returning food to the fire that was off fire. How do I return it to the fire? What kind of fire? What's the situation? We will discuss all the details of that so that you fully understand the way that halacha envisions reheating your food on Shabbos. Let's say you forget and you make a mistake, and let's say according to the second opinion, it's that little window between raw and machal ben drusai. Probably pretty, whatever, it can happen. And velo higila machal ben drusai, it didn't make it to ben drusai, so it's usur. It is not permitted to be eaten on Shabbos. Obviously, if you do it purposefully, you fully understand what you're doing by leaving it on the fire. Again, you're not violating an issur d'oraisa here. Again, as I've said numerous times, you cannot violate a biblical commandment, the biblical commandment of observing Shabbos by actions that were taken on Erev Shabbos. It's not possible according to the Beis Hillel who we follow. Beis Shammai, a different story. I don't want to get into that. That's if we're learning, the Gemara sugyas. We could talk about Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel in terms of their, Beis Shammai holds d'oraisa, etc. But we don't hold that. You can violate any kind of d'oraisa from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. But you can violate a d'Rabbanan. Rabbis make the rules. So here's one wherever if you miss it, if you don't follow the rule, so if you did it on purpose, it's one halacha. If you did it by accident, it's another halacha. If you did it on purpose, it's one halacha. If you did it by accident, it's another halacha. If you did it on purpose, it's one halacha. If you did it by accident, it's another halacha. If you did it by accident, That's another halacha in terms of how long you have to wait. If it's by accident, for yourself, you probably have to wait until after Shabbos is over. And I believe that there is a machlokes about how long that has to be for other people. I think for acherim, for others, according to the Mishnah Berurah, it's until Mosei Shabbos. Though we will have more to say, I think, on this topic in future shiur. Okay. The most important part of this whole thing was the Ramaz citation, the Ramaz ruling, which was v'nagu l'hakel kasvara harachona. The minhag follows the latter opinion. Now it's interesting that I don't know if the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim, is reading too much into this. So here's the Be'er Halacha I want to take a look at. It has in my edition has a star next to v'nagu l'hakel kasvara harachona. So if you're going to go over the Be'er Halacha part, you should see this there. V'nahagu l'hakel kasvara harachona. Look what line it is here.
5.
Line 5, exactly. Line 5 towards the end. Okay, here we go. So he writes, I am a Beis Yosef, which is the Shulchan Aruch's work prior to the Shulchan Aruch, where he explains things in much greater detail. Sheherich hara be'elu shehashtei deos. And by the way, I try always, before I prepare anything that we learn, I always try to learn the Beis Yosef first, because it gives me a good grounding into what are the different opinions that are out there. And how did the Shulchan Aruch, how did Rav Yosef Karo read these? They read these different sources, and how did he approach it? So I'm telling you, you can take Mishnah Berurah's word, or take my word. It was very long, very lengthy treatment of this whole topic. Of course, it's very practical. We're not talking about a halacha that a tanis chalom on Shabbos. The dreams we talked about. We're talking about a very practical law. The divrei harash shekos, and he copies the words of the Rush, and he quotes them really, quotes the words which were what? The Jewish people, this is a great line. The Jewish people are very particular and punctilious about how they do the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos, about enjoying and delighting in the Shabbos, which relates to, of course, enjoying your food, enjoying it warm. They're not going to listen to us. This is the Rosh talking. He's like, all right, just give it to them. Give them the lenient opinion. They're not going to listen to the strict opinion. They're going to mess up, and they're not going to listen to us. Give them a lenient opinion. It's fine. This is what the Rosh writes. Ayin sham mashma mizeh. Now, what you can learn from the Rosh is his words. They're not close to us if we tell them to follow the more strict opinion is the rak mishum limchos. Only because they were never going to listen. He doesn't protest the minhag. That's the Ramaz language. V'nahagu lahakel. He's reporting that the Ashkenazim were lenient like the second opinion, and so he's saying, look, I don't want to start messing with them. They have upon whom to rely. I'm not gonna play games here. I'm not gonna protest. The Beis Yosef Gufa, the Rav Yosef Kar himself. He quotes the first opinion. Now there's a I don't know who has put this out there. I want to say it was Rav Ovadia Yosef. I've heard this quote in his name. I've never seen it firsthand, so if I'm wrong, I'm only repeating what somebody else has told me, who I trust, which is that Rav Ovadia Yosef has a general position that if the Shulchan Aruch quotes two opinions, one is stated, as he puts it here, stama. Just he goes right into it. And the second one is, and there are those that say, so like the Mishnah Berurah here wants the Mishnah Be'er Halacha by the same author. It's all the same. Mashma gam kein dato not el hachber. Sounds like Shulchan Aruch really thinks the correct opinion should be the first opinion, and therefore the Beis Yosef also leans in the direction of being machmer for the first opinion. Again, I don't know today, and I sorry I failed on asking a Sfaradi, a posek. I'll try to remember to ask Rabbi Jachter, who's the posek for our Eruv, he's an Ashkenazi, who's a rabbi of a Sephardic congregation. He's very learned in Sephardic Psak Halacha. I'll ask him, do they follow the first opinion? Because the Mechaber seems to lean in that direction. He says, look, at the end of the day, we don't have the koach to fight those who are lenient. Because you know why? Because Minig Yisrael has spoken. If the Jewish people, if 95% of the Jewish people are doing one thing, believe me, the rabbis are going to be very, 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 very cautious to come out against it. Because as Rav Moshe Feinstein was fond of noting, if you're always paskin to machmir, no one asks you questions. I think it was Rav Moshe who said that. In his introduction, the people can ask. At the end of the day, you won't be asked questions because no one wants to hear your answers. And at the end of the day, the people are already practicing this. To come out against it is not in the spirit of how halachic decisors have Ashkenazi halachic decisors have positioned themselves over the course of years. That goes back to Tosfos, who already justified many times things. They justified many times the practices that were hard to justify according to the simple reading of the Gemara, but they would do so. And this is a tradition. Sorry, Michael. And there's a tradition that the Aruch HaShulchan was much more fond of upholding than Mishnah Berurah actually himself, because he was a defender of Bnei Yisrael. Mishnah Berurah was much more of a what is text. Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik's son, who was a scholar, he wrote Rupture and Reconstruction about this topic, which I think was just actually reprinted by.
You're freezing.
And see here that I'm on the lower internet. Give me.
Totally frozen.
Easier for myself.
Sorry, guys, I'm back. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got to. So if it's 8 o'clock to finish this,
Yeah.
if it's 8 o'clock, you're saying an hour and a half.
Hour and a quarter in halachic time. Yeah.
So an hour or two. So that means I should start. Can I start preparing prior to that?
Oh, of course. Prepare for Shabbos. You should be. It's a mitzvah to prepare all
So
Friday.
I can
Wednesday.
eat, so
Exactly.
No, I'm just asking. So I can eat. I'm getting it. So I can eat, let's say, 5 o'clock and come into Shabbat.
These days, you should start no earlier than I think around 6:50. I think is plan. You can look on one of those fancy apps that talks about.
Yeah, it only goes one by each day. That's the problem.
Oh, so you look ahead.
Okay,
Look ahead.
I'll do it in the morning.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. So, anyways, you can read the rest, but you got the basic point here of the Be'er Halacha, which is that really the first opinion seems to be the one that some people feel more comfortable with from a halachic perspective, but that is not what the Jewish people have voted with their feet, at least the Ashkenazim, and therefore we follow the second opinion. I will also say, he says here, by the way, I think if you continue, it says, basically says, if you really try to follow the first opinion. I'm not so comfortable saying that. The answer is, we follow the second opinion. That is the Psak Halacha for generations upon generations for Ashkenazim. There's no reason we should, I'm not even sure why we should try to be machmir here. I think that you're in good company if you're following the second opinion. You don't need to try and aim for the first opinion. I don't think that's a requirement at all. If you want to,
that's
not
like,
a problem.
That's like Yom Tov. Either Yom Tov is translated from the Heritage. I gotta get another book because I lost it. Anyway, it says that if one way is the righteous way, you do it the righteous way, and the one is you do it as it says, Yom Tov. It's a good day.
Right.
So
Okay.
It depends on how you look at it.
All right. Good. V'cholzeh, let's go back now in the Shulchan Aruch Chabad. Okay. V'cholzeh, this is all new material now. V'cholzeh, the inyan shehiyah. All these things with regards to shehiyah, Shakaderi Yosheves al gabe al kisei shel barzel or al gabe avonim ve'ena nogas b'gechalim. Aval hatmana al gabe gechalim divrei kol asun. He kind of pivots here. Now this is not really about shahiyah anymore. For a moment, he says this is all good, well and good, so long as the pot that you are heating up is sitting on a kisei shel barzel, a chair of metal. Now, what's he talking about here? Look at the Mishnah Berurah, Memhei. Al kisei shel barzel ke'ein pitput shel shalosh raglayim v'hagechalim munachim tachta. We're talking about like a tripod. You've seen those things, actually. I've seen those things in my life. Look at a tripod. There's a fire, that could be put underneath it. So it's like a tripod with 3 legs, and there are coals underneath it that are heating this up. Okay. So it sounds like there has to be some separation between the fire and the pot and the heat source, or on top of stones. These are very hot stones that are being heated up by coals underneath it, something like that. But they're not touching, right? Or whatever. The stones are being held up, whatever, and it's super hot, I guess. And bottom line is your pot's not touching the coals. Then it's okay, no problem. You're like, what's the potential issue here? Let's keep reading now. Aval hatmana al gabe gechol. Now, the word tamun means to hide. Okay, this is going to get a full treatment in Reish Nun Zayin. So I can't do it full justice right now. But there's a whole topic related to heating up food that's called hatmana. It's not, I think, as practical knowing the laws of Shehi and Chazara. But hatmana basically was that they would take a pot and they would essentially envelop it in something, whether that was in some sort of heat source. They would envelop it. They could even do hatmana b'chol, in the sand, right? So everything is just sort of covered over. So if you are doing that, if let's say there are coals and then you have a pot and then on the sides of the pot you envelop it in something, so it's just like a very tight heat source. So it's a very high heat, extremely high heat. So there, the basic halacha with hatmana, no matter the heat source, and no matter where the food is in the cooking process, even if it's fully cooked and it's stomach viralo, the continuation of it is not good for it. It is not allowed. Hatmana is not allowed because it's the general idea is that it's for Shabbos afternoon, Shabbos day. Well, and therefore you're going to mess around and play around with the heat source because you're trying to get this food to be warm and ready to be in a delicious edible state come lunchtime. So no matter what the heat source was, so they made a blanket gezeirah, the rabbis did, that hatmana is not allowed. We will do a full treatment of hatmana in Reish Nun Zayin. What was important for these purposes is to know that when you do shahiyah, the one thing you have to keep in mind is you can't violate hatmana. So all these things we talk about are good so long as you don't put the food directly on a heat source and then envelop it in something. So the one place where I know this being, I'll give you 2 examples where this is one potentially.
Excuse me, Rabbi, what is hatmana again?
What was that? Say it again.
What is hatmana again?
The word comes from the word to hide something. Tamun is to hide something. So it's when food is on a heat source and then is it is covered over by something fully while on the heat source.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
So what's important here to understand, there are 2 cases. One I think is completely not a problem. And the second one I think is a problem. The first one, you ever seen anybody, you can just say yes, raise your hand, virtual hand, whatever. You ever seen anybody when they're making a cholent, maybe this is your minhag, they will put little tiny aluminum foil balls at the bottom of the crock pot and place the crock pot insert into the crock pot, into the Steve's like, no, Tommy's no, Hannah's no. No, I don't do it, by the way. No. The reason that you will maybe encounter in your life, there are some people who do this. So to me, it's a whopper of a chumrah because they're claiming it's hatmana. Because the heat source is the element, right? You put it in, on the sides of the crock pot, they envelop the insert of the crock pot and it has a cover, to which but my Rebbe, perhaps more importantly, would say, but the top of the pot's not covered. A lid is not a cover. It's not enveloping it. That's just how you cook it. That's part of the pot. So there are those who will claim that a crock pot, by its very nature, is a violation of Hatmana, unless you put something that separates between the heat source and the insert, which is why, again, I saw this when I lived in Washington Heights and we would eat back with different people. I saw people did this. I was very open with people. It's like, I don't do that. So if you're coming into my house, I don't do that. But that's why they did it. Again, as I already gave away, I don't think that's something we should be worried about. But if you've ever seen that or heard, or you hear about this from her one day, you'll know that there's another opinion. So the second thing, which is a bigger issue, is when you have food, let's say on a warming tray, which is a heat source, no question, and you can reheat we'll even talk about how you can reheat your food on a warming tray, not a problem. They sell at Judaica stores blankets. There are like these covers that you put on your food, and it says Hilchot Shabbat on them, right? They like literally sell these things. So I remember Rabbi Weider, my Rebbe, once saying they should change it to instead of a Shabbos blanket to a Machal Shabbos blanket, because to use this and envelop your food over a heat source actually is a problem of Hatmana, and that I'm not sure why. Again, this is a little bit like the kashrus organizations that got involved in these Shabbos ovens, which we'll talk about more probably next week. This is a big mistake that was made by whoever was manufacturing these blankets. They basically, over top of these things, they completely envelop the food on all sides, and it's over a heat source. That's you gotta be very careful. There are ways you can get around it if let's say you put it on top and the sides are open. I'm not saying for sure you're violating Shabbos, but it could lead more likely to Chil Shabbos than.
We're talking about doing this for eating on Shabbos lunch, not
even Friday night, even as the food is going into Shabbos, that Hatmana is going to be a problem no matter what. So if you're covering your food over with like towels and blankets and whatever, suddenly your food needs to just make sure that when you're doing it, you don't fully envelop the dish or the food. That's something you have to be careful about.
So what about putting something on a grill and then
so
covering the grill?
So long as it's not touching. So even if you're, let's say, having food from Friday night in the oven that was in there, and let's say even had a Shabbos thing, so it goes off, 30 minutes into Shabbos, whatever, just keeps the food warm. It's not a problem because it literally is, we're talking about a heat source, and then the food is literally enveloped right on top of it because it's really retaining the heat at a very high temperature.
Electric, what we were talking a long time ago. Still thinking about electric.
The
stove,
crock pot?
Electric stove or whatever you call them, to put food onto.
Like a blech? We're gonna get to a blech. Hang
It's
tight.
like a block, but we were talking about it, and you said, you and the Rabbi Morgan said that's a good thing, but I forgot.
Oh, the warming tray. Yeah, we'll talk more about that probably next week. Yes, we're gonna get into that when we talk about Chazar. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
I understood that those blankets, as long as you have some air coming in, you don't.
Yeah, correct.
Air
Yes.
proof, then they're okay.
Yes, correct. Yeah. No, I think when my rabbi said it, he said it tongue in cheek because they make a big deal to sell these things, but they could turn into a problem if somebody doesn't fully know these laws, and they could just like, I'll just wrap it in this thing, and that way it'll get even warmer.
You can wrap it, but you can just.
If you leave it
top of
open, let's say you just you have a thing on top and then the sides are open, not a problem.
Or
No.
even these openings on the side, it's okay.
Correct. Yeah, it has to be fully enveloped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I told you kind of pivoted here to talking about a different topic for a moment, which is not really about Shahiyah, but it's something you have to keep in mind when you're doing Shahiyah. You shouldn't violate Hatmana in the process. Let's take a look at Mem Vav, just to talk about the Hatmana thing very quickly, or just mention it in passing. He will, even at the end here, say we're going to have a whole full treatment of this in a couple simanim from now. Hatmana al gabe gecholim, hachei svira le'lahamechaber. If the bottom of the pot is touching the coals, it's called hatmana, assuming again the rest of it is covered over also. And therefore it will be usher even if it's fully cooked, and the continuation of this of heating it is bad for it. Actually, it's not good. It's going to dry the food out. Siman Reish and Zion. Sif Zion, as we'll talk about when we get to Siman Reish and Zion. In particular, Sif Zion talks about why it's a problem that you're not allowed to, even when it's fully cooked, you're not allowed to do this. Violate any of the laws of Hatmana. Let's go now to the Ramah. The Ramah here adds in V'yesh Omrim the Afilu im Hakadera. Sorry, right. It may be that the Shulchan Aruch's opinion, they don't follow this opinion. The Shulchan Aruch's opinion is that, according to what he wrote here, that if it's just touching the coals on the bottom, that's Hatmana, even without the enveloping part. I should have made that clear. The Ramah is going to be the one here is going to say you don't need, it has to be fully enveloped. But it could be that according to the Mechaber, just being literally directly on the heat source, not on a grill on top of the coals, but like on the coals, then it's a problem. But here the Ramah adds in, even if it is on the fire literally, as long as it's uncovered on the top, no problem. That's not called Atmana Bishari V'chein HaMinhag, and that is the practice of the at least again Ashkenazi Jews. Rak, now you have to be very careful about one other thing. This is a separate issue again that has nothing to do with Shehiyah or Hatmana, but now it's a separate issue they have to deal with, which is Rak Sheni's harmless not kan katzat kolam Shabbos min ha'esh. You should try to take it off the fire by a little bit off, before Shabbos, like have a little separation. Why? It's just practical. So that a Jew can remove the pot from there without any issue. If you haven't removed it from the fire, if it's literally on the fire on Shabbos, you should then ask a non-Jew to help you to take it off the fire. But if there is no non-Jew available, then a Jew can't do it. What's the whole fear here? Take it off very carefully. So try as not to shake the coals that are underneath the heat source, because if you're shaking the coals, the fear is because first of all, when you do that, what's going to happen? It's going to be ma'avir. It's going to, when you move the coals around, sometimes it rekindles a new part of the coal. And that's a different issue of lighting a fire on Shabbos, of kindling a flame on Shabbos. But even if you did that a little bit, davar she'ein miskavenhu v'sharei, it would be okay because it's a davar she'einu miskaven. It's a very important, I don't know if we've talked about this yet, by the way, in this class. A very important category here not category, it's a very important rule and principle on Shabbos. If you try, in this case, let's use this case here. I try to remove the pot off the fire. I have no intention of rekindling the fire. I couldn't care less if the fire gets a drop hotter or stronger. My goal was to take it off. When I assess the situation, I say, look, I could pull it off and nothing will happen. Or sometimes when these things happen, a coal adjusts itself. That's a davar she'einu miskaven. When I don't know what's going to fully happen, I have no intention for the thing that's going to happen, the havara, the kindling of the flame, that is 100% mutter. We pass on the Rabbi Shimon and the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos. No question, it is mutter. It's not even like after the fact it's mutter. Mutter, you can engage in that action because even if B happens, I had no intention for B, and B was not guaranteed to happen. I intended on A. A was removing the pot. The fact that the coal suddenly shook and it kindled one of the flame a little bit, that's B, and I had no intention for B, and B was not a guaranteed outcome. Then A is mutter. Now, we'll review this next week, so Michael, if it's not clear, don't worry. There is a situation called the psik reshe. I don't know if I've mentioned this here. The case in the Gemara, you chop the chicken's head off to use it as a toy for your child. And inevitably, you knew the thing was going to die when you chopped the head off. But I had intention to give my child a toy. Okay, but you knew it was going to happen. Okay, so then if B is a guaranteed outcome, even though your intention is A, I want the ball for the head for my child so they could have a puppet, then B is usher. Sorry, then A is usher because B is an inevitable outcome, which is a biblical prohibition. So here it's not a guarantee, and that's why he's saying even if you did this and it happened, it wasn't a guaranteed outcome, and therefore taking it off the fire is mutter. So again, best to avoid the whole problem in the first place if you can, right? We should never rely on a davar she'ein miskaven if we can avoid it, or and certainly on a psik ratio, but definitely on a davar she'ein miskaven, we should not rely on it. And therefore, this is all mutter, sort of as you take a steps down here. Ideally, you get a non-Jew. First, I'll take it off the fire a little bit, so it's not like directly on the fire. If not, then ask a non-Jew to help you, and then a Jew could do it. And even if it works out that the things kind of shake about, it's okay. Let's read the Mishnah Berurah here. Mem Zayin. Kolzman b'chulei. V'afilu im hakader omeres besoch hatanur v'hatanur sasum. And this goes to your point, Hinda. Okay? Even if the food was in the oven, inside the oven, toch. That's how you had it set up from Friday afternoon to Friday night. As we talk about, that is mutter. The temperature adjustment thing, that's like this other calculations. You have to think about the other problems that could happen too, right? Well, if I open it, will the flame at the bottom of my oven get hotter because I opened the oven? Okay, so these are things you have to calculate, but let's leave that aside for the moment. If the pot is inside the oven and the oven is closed, that is not called hatmana. That is not called hatmana, as we'll talk about when we get to Siman Reish and Zayin, Sof Ches Ayin Sham. Inside the oven is not hatmana. Hatmana is when it is fully enveloped on top of the heat source. Okay. Think about like a baked potato on the grill, right? A baked potato on a grill, when you wrap it in that aluminum foil, that is hatmana, over top of a heat source. Okay. It may also that need be that it needs to be touching the heat source on the bottom.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Exactly.
If it's on the rack.
Exactly. If it's on the rack, not a problem. But if you put it on the coals, then that's hatmana. Think about that picture when you think about hatmana. That only when it's directly on the heat source. You're correct. I know.
I mean, that's not on the grills. That's not on the. That's if you take the.
You take the racks off. You have.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. If you ever been to like I remember when we did with the kids, 8th graders, I had a trip last year. I went to an overnight trip. They had a bonfire. We did a bonfire. You take a baked potato, you throw it on the thing. It's not on a rack. So, anyways, memchas shehi megula. It's open from the top. It's not covered with clothing or those blankets on top, then it's okay. It's not a problem at all. The ayin lekaman b'siman b'sayiberation and zayin sifches. Okay, so let's take a look over there. You'll get much more about this when we get to Reish Nun Zayin. Vishari, and it's mutter. We pass on that it's mutter. The Ashkenazi psak. Hainu tehu rak bichlal shehiyah. It's just called shehiyah. It's open on top. It's just shehiyah. No, don't worry for hatmana. And as long as it's cooked to the point of ben drusai and it's on the fire as Shabbos enters, no problem. If you just like we paskin like the second opinion, we practice like the second opinion. Nun yesh lahasiro misham. You should take it off the fire a little bit before Shabbos so you avoid the whole coal, the whole situation of the coals shaking. The kasher Yisrael zar shelo yinaneh hagechalim. It's hard for a Jew not to, when you take it off the fire, not to a little bit move the coals. When you take the pot off the fire. Nun aleph, mutter liyisrael. So a Jew can do it if there's no non-Jew available. When it's sitting on top of the coals. Let's say it's like enveloped in coals. So you have the coals on the bottom and coals along the side. First of all, get yourself a good pair of oven mitts. Then a Jew should not take it. Why? Because now is it really a davar she'ein miskaven? It's changed. It's not a question. If it's on the side, you know that the coals are going to fall, right? You're going to take it and they're going to just fall in. It will definitely stoke the coals, and therefore it will kindle. The bottom coals are going to get kindled. And by the way, you're going to also extinguish some of the top coals when they're, I'm not the expert here which coals are going to, but you're going to mess with the coals. Yeah, I'm like, oh, but I don't care. Psik ratio. It is an inevitable situation. It is a guaranteed 100% outcome Some people are even machmir about this situation, even by a non-Jew. And he says, take a look at the Magen Avraham and the Eli Rabbah about that question. The nearer, but certainly if you're in that situation, nearer to L'tzorech Shabbos, when you're talking about, this is my Shabbos lunch, it's my Shabbos dinner. What am I going to eat? Yesh lismoch al dasam mekilim de ali de eno yehud. Through non-Jew, okay. Right. It's the Rabbanon already, right? You're talking about a psik reshe on a derabbanon. Maybe there's much more room for leniency, and we will talk about this topic as it comes up more and more. When it comes to psik reshe that relates to a derabbanon, we are far more lenient, and actually maybe permissive, according to the to Tosfos, or permissive when the inevitable thing is a derabbanon. So long as I get no benefit from it. There's going to be an added wrinkle here. Because sometimes I don't care, but like, oh, actually, it's good now that it happened. B happened. I'm actually kind of happy B happened. If B, I couldn't care less about B, then it's going to be 100% fine, 100% permissible. An example, this is kind of a silly example. It's coming to my head. Let's say you have an animal or you have a child who needs to use the bathroom, but you're not near a bathroom. Watering the grass is not allowed on Shabbos. It's not allowed. It's actually one of the serious things. So but it's such a situation where it was not on your grass. They talk about this. If it's not on your grass or whatever. So what do I care if somebody else's grass gets watered? I don't have any benefit from it. So now there's no lo ichpas. I don't care. And you could add in maybe it's not the normal way that you would water the grass. Okay, so bottom line is that there are ways that you can permit such a thing again when you don't care. I'm using that as an example because I don't care what happens to somebody else's lawn.
Right.
If it's my lawn, okay, I care that my flowers grow and my grass grows and this yada yada yada. But when it's somebody else's, that's lo ichpas. I don't really care. You can transfer that situation to other scenarios where. You could perhaps say that in your oven or in your refrigerator, let's say sometimes I know in my refrigerator there's like a little dial that's like it's a digital dial that also says what setting it's on for the refrigerator and the freezer. So I covered it over not because I deactivated it, but so that way I don't see it. I mean, I guess try to distance yourself from the electronics, fine. But if it goes on, and let's say I hadn't covered it over. I don't care that I know it's on setting 6. I really couldn't care less. I couldn't care less that it's on 6 or 5 because that thing never adjusts. I don't adjust it. So that's probably a lo ichpas. It's not adding light. The bulb in the refrigerator is a different situation because there, even if I didn't care in that moment, I wanted to get the thing out of it. But the bulb going on does help me see into the fridge and helps me identify what's going on in there. So we can talk about these situations a lot. I actually need to finish up and I have to go. I see at the time I have to really go to camp, pick up my kids from camp, or to take them to camp. The idea of opening and closing an oven, and again, when they talk about opening and closing an oven, it's not the way we open and close our ovens. We will talk about how they open and close their ovens. They would, as the Gemara describes, tuach batit, they would actually have a clay covering, and it was almost like they would, to break it open was to break open a clay, almost a wall of clay. This kept the heat in. Also, when they covered their pots, a lot of times the Gemara describes that they would cover it with clay. They would make a clay molding over it, and that's how they would cover it. So when it comes to opening and closing the oven, or really, let's say, reclosing it on Shabbos, not so simple that you can reclose the oven on Shabbos. This actually is very practical. Also, if you leave food in your oven, on the Friday night case, that's where you're allowed to use your oven. If there's food still in the oven and the heat source is still on, it will readjust, and therefore it's potentially good for you. It could be an issue. We will talk about all these things when we get to Reish Nun Zayin. In this case, it's Reish Nun Tes. Also, that's where it talks about Hatmana in the context of not Hatmana, of the oven and the opening and the closing of the oven. There are a lot of topics still to cover. Okay. We'll stop here. We made it all the way to the end of Sif Aleph. So Yasher Kochachem. We will pick up with Sif Beis next time, which talks about the topic of Chazaro. So we will jump right into it next week. Right off the bat, he just gets right into what are the conditions that one has to meet in order to return food to the fire on Shabbos.
So you were talking to me about the clock. So let's say today is Shabbos. It says the clock is 7